Adorbs. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce you to Good Gracious. Good Gracious, I was posting on my stories today, so if you follow me on Instagram, you can see some of the real life inspirations. As you know, I always come with a story and where I was and what I was photographing and what inspired the ideas. I don't always take inspiration in the most literal sense, like I saw this pink flower, so I'm going to paint a pink flower. I take inspiration sometimes literally, but also mostly like feeling, mood, palette, a sense of place, memories. And Good Gracious is named for, it's kind of like the obvious exclamation of good gracious, which is a very kind of Southern thing to exclaim when something's just amazing. So I named it that because of how much beauty I saw during my travels with my new husband, then fiance, through Scotland and parts of England to visit some of his family. And that's also where we got engaged. So when we started in Scotland, I was so overwhelmed by the beauty of the landscape and the palette of the landscape and the heather in the fields and the sheep who would never sit still for photos. So there are no sheep. But mostly Good Gracious really was born when I was able to go to my new sister-in-law's and brother-in-law's home in Swanmore. And they introduced me and gave me a tour of their garden. And when I say garden, I mean like it took us about 20 minutes to get through the whole thing as she gave me a tour. It's so beautiful. So the print that I'm wearing right now is called Beata's Garden. And it really anchors the whole collection. You can see what a beautiful job that this print does as a border. So I'm just going to go through the pieces with you so I can kind of talk about, sorry about the lighting, right? Can you guys see? Talk about how these all work. So this is what a full yard, I imagine, looks like. So amazing to cut up in so many different ways. Most of you know that I love prints that behave as big prints as well as small prints all at the same time, right? So if you were to cut squares just on the floral, you might believe that that whole fabric came from a field of flowers when really it also operates like a border print. I never remember colorway names, so I'm not even going to try. This is the other one. More bluey, purpley, so very glowy. I feel like this one actually, like when I look at this colorway, it really truly reminds me exactly of Beata's Garden and what that color felt like on the day she showed it to me with all the sunlight coming through. It looked like there were little lights inside of everything. And I'm going to go ahead and go for broke and show you the other kind of bigger feature. It's not a huge print, but it does have kind of an interesting impact. So this is called New Forest. And New Forest is a real place in England where there are real wild horses that we came across as we were walking. And I knew that when I was photographing these beautiful creatures, and you know, I was probably the quickest to be brave and walk right up to them and start chatting and trying not to scare them away. But it was a very magical moment for me and all of us that were there together that day. The idea of wild horses, like I know it's a thing, but I've never been able to experience it. So I really wanted to set the horses into a palette that felt magical. And I also set them under the trees a little bit camouflaged like they were to us because we walked for a long way in the wrong direction on a hot day in England. And we were pretty thirsty and we were all fighting over the maps that weren't working out there. But then we finally found this herd underneath the trees and it was so beautiful. I want to talk to you about the use of this fabric because I think it's one of those things like, I love that because I love horses or fill in the blank or my daughter loves horses or whatever it is. But I think very frequently when you have something that's so kind of interesting or different, as much as people love it, what's the second question? What do I do with it, right? So the way that this fabric is designed, obviously there's a scene, but we're going to cut this up. And so I wanted to kind of just point out, like I've got it as a whole piece, which is an obvious way to use it, either as a backing or a large piece. We have it right in the middle of this quilt here as a vignette, and this is the Good Gracious quilt. I'll keep pointing back to it. But it works beautifully as a full garment, kind of it's almost like a paint by numbers vintage style print. But also the way that the trees are kind of aligned, you can use it in vertical borders, the way things are kind of framed out vertically. And you can also use it in horizontal borders, the way things are kind of framed out, like the treetops, right? So if you wanted to make horizontal borders with it, it works just as well as vertically. And then, of course, the little fussy cut vignettes of just a few horses under the trees. We were able to pick out so many different ones here. And not just like one little horse, but also packs of 3 horses and packs of 4 horses. So you can really use this fabric in a lot of different ways and a lot of different scales. And while we're on creatures, we can introduce Juliana's beautiful little dress. So, and she made this from a vintage pattern. Do you remember the name of the vintage pattern?
Vintage pattern. It's a simplicity pattern, and I did not.
It's a simplicity pattern. Hit up Juliana. She will slowly email you back with the answer on the pattern. But these little swans, we also fussy cut, are really fun. There's only a slight scale difference between the darker one and the lighter colored fabric. Juliana's wearing the lighter colored one. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law live in a town called Swanmore, which I thought was like a cute reason to name. It's not where I saw the swans, just full disclosure. Doesn't matter, we can make it up now, can't we? So this just has a really fun, it almost feels kind of like a dot from across the room, you know? But it's a really fun little print to use in big pieces, small pieces, and definitely fussy cut. But these are the Queen's swans. We saw these guys swimming around in Windsor. So now that we've seen the creatures, let's go through the palette. And this is like, so you can kind of just get a read on the full palette. I bundled it all together. I always like looking at it this way. I see it flat when I'm designing the art, but I really like to see it folded and stacked together because I know that that's how you're presenting it in your shops. And it really helps kind of understand the palette. So it's a very rich, vivid palette, but there's a lot of natural tones in there. There are some rusty browns, there are some sky blues and some kind of mountain purples, but it's highlighted with these really, really bright and light yellows and purples. I did 4 of these because I liked it so much and I felt like it was such a fun basic. I'll let you hold up this one. So this is called Fair Isle, my favorite souvenir that I brought home. It's probably impossible to see in here from Scotland, was a lovely little investment in a Fair Isle sweater that had this stitch pattern in it. And it's such a beautiful kind of tonal. You can see how much light it brings in projects. Like you can see how much light it brings here to the whole collection and picks up on the yellows and oranges in the quilt. And also, I put it in this bag here, these 2 light bright colors. So it's also fun to fussy cut because of the geometry in a couple ways. And then we went a little deeper and smaller where they're a lot more tonal, smaller scale. Like this would be like an amazing little Christmas kind of tonal. It just feels very Christmassy to me. Easier to see tomorrow at the booth, close up, and better lighting. And on the geometry notes, I also have this other little, it's not that little, a print. Oh, did I bring the backing piece? I can't remember if it's here, but it's really cool. It's in the card. But I also made this, it's almost like a cheater, but not quite. This is called In Town. It's inspired by my sister-in-law and her passing out like her favorite politicians' pamphlets all over town. Or no, it's not called In Town, it's called Town Meeting. I love the idea of all these little parts and pieces. I have another print called In Town. But I love the idea of like a little town center and small town England. And you can see how beautifully it works cut up into 4-inch squares. We fussy cut some of those for the center of these, so we don't have always like an animal in the middle. Sometimes we just put these little geometric shapes. Oh, right on cue, the tote would like to be shown. So this is just a simple tote that we did with the Fair Isle print. There's no pattern for this, it's just 4-inch squares. I'm sure there's probably a pattern for exactly this somewhere out in the world, which is why I haven't written one for you. But it's a panel front and back of 5 by 4-inch squares. seam together. But you can see that we didn't always fussy cut that in town, like right on the kind of flower. Sometimes we fussy cut like where they met on the corners instead. So it looks cute both ways. And then we lined it with this really fun other geometric print I have called Castle Tops, which guess what that was inspired by? Good job. So this one almost reminds me of kind of like a Missoni knit where, you know, like those were the colors I was kind of thinking about. Nothing to do with England, right? Just a favorite Italian knitwear company. But I wanted that kind of groovy 70s feel to it and to have it kind of be just a little off-kilter stripe. But I think it worked out really well. Like I kept finding myself reaching for this when I was coming up with ideas for how to use the collection. And quilts and patchwork, but this makes a beautiful binding cut on the bias, beautiful bias cut stems, so you have that kind of undulating stripe. So really kind of inspired by Missoni, as well as like those really horrible acrylic crocheted blankets from the 70s that we love for their color, but you know you don't want to touch it, right? Because it's going to immediately give you the shivers, but this feels amazing. So I have 2 more prints to show you. This one is called something that I can't remember. I think we called it hollyhocks. What did we call this one? Oh, Happy Blooms. I think maybe somebody else already had a hollyhocks or something. Was that it? I wanted to call it hollyhocks, but someone beat me to it. So this was just one of the florals that I captured on my walks around England, and there's a nice little spot in the background. So it makes a really nice kind of evenly dispersed print that it does. You can cut this any old way, and it's just going to contribute something really floral, but really sort of just sweet and interesting as well. And the last one is another floral print. But see, I didn't do all flowers. There's some geometry in there. This was based on this beautiful little ground cover that I saw everywhere, and I had to look it up. Do you have that little plant identifier app? Do you use that? And you stick the photo in there, and it tells you something that you know it's not. But this one was correct. It was silverweed. I kept seeing silverweed pop up underneath our feet as we were walking through the woods and around lots of small and medium-sized towns in England. But again, like these are all kind of providing a beautiful texture. Things like the Happy Blooms really almost create like a dot from a distance. But things like silverweed create like really beautiful texture. So we have one more quilt to show you. Come over here, I guess. So some of you may remember my plot twist quilt from 2016. Well, my friend Cindy said, oh, we really need to do plot twist out of good gracious. So this is a really very, very different version of plot twist, a pattern that I designed back in 2016 for a wovens collection. And I have the pattern here that I can show you, but it's one that you can appreciate from afar in better lighting, and one that you can really appreciate up close too. Those of you that have been following my quilt making know how much I like basic, simple patchwork combined with pretty large-scale applique. I find large-scale applique, well, you cover more ground quicker, and it's also more approachable if you're new to applique. And it's also more easily adaptable to any kind of method whether you want to do raw edge or needle turned. So I was really excited to see this completely differently than the original pattern. And we have the fun leopard on the back, because why not, right? So that pattern, I'm going to run through the patterns that you've been looking at today so far. So this little dress that we have, and Juliana, you just sold that, obviously. Thanks. This dress right here is one of my simple start patterns. It's just a very simple shift. My simple start patterns are available wholesale. There's 7 of them now. They're really kind of designed for people that are new to garment making. And with every pattern, you basically learn a new skill set. So it tells you like on the back, what are the skills that you're going to learn in this one. And so the whole entire series is a skill building education of like putting in a centered zipper, putting in an invisible zipper, pockets, what else? Pleats, gathering, bias cut, you know, like every pattern kind of provides something different. The one I'm wearing is the colored pencil skirt. It's kind of become a tradition. I make a pencil skirt every time I come to market because it's just, I mean, I can do this start to finish in like an hour and a half. Like it's so quick and it's so easy. It's simple start. So if you're interested in bringing those patterns into your shop, they are a really good bridge from quilt makers into garment makers if you want to kind of diversify your offerings. If you're interested in those patterns or any of my patterns, this is the plot twist, the original one. I've kind of moved on to PDF patterns. I don't print a lot of quilt patterns anymore. I don't think I'm very different than a lot of people in that regard, but I do have a program to sell both. So obviously the printed patterns, those are available wholesale. And if you're interested in buying wholesale from me, you can just write to wholesale@AnnaMariaHorner.com. And we'll send you back some instructions on where to go and what password to use to get in and do some shopping. We do free shipping in the US. We have no minimums. On this Simple Start collection, if you buy 10 of them, say for a class that you're going to host, you get the 11th one free to use as your class model or teaching from pattern. And for the PDF patterns, this one and lots of others, well, this one is going to be a PDF pattern that's available at my website. And normally the way that I wholesale PDF patterns, I kind of came up with a few years ago, and it's worked really well for people that know about it and have taken advantage of it. A lot of my more popular patterns are PDF ones, like the Color Dive and the Feather Bed. And what I've done is I've made those available, a lot of them, on the wholesale site. And I also have some really simple ones, too, that are great just to create kits from. But what I've done is I basically charge you one time $98. You download, which seems like a lot to pay for one pattern, but it's yours forever then. And I don't want to know about it after that. Like, you can sell it however you like. You can print it, you can kit it, you can distribute it digitally, you can give it away. It's completely up to you, but that's your single one-time buy-in for the patterns. And some of them are wonderful to, you know, clean up some of the bolts, right? And like to create new patterns from. Like there's one called Crossover that we have kitted over and over and over again. And it's so simple that it makes you go, why do people need a pattern for this? It's just this quarter square. I mean, it's just a quarter square triangle and whole squares alternated. That's it. But people want those fabric requirements and they want, you know, the instructions and all that. But anyway, this pattern will also be on the PDF site, but I'm going to tell the folks at Free Spirit that whoever gets, I'm telling them right now, actually, you're watching it, whoever gets the full collection is welcome to that pattern without paying me anything, okay, that you can distribute and use to kit and sell it or give it away, whatever you want to do with it, okay? I've done patterns so many different ways over the years that I have learned, like, I don't love free all the time because I want all of us to have something to sell, mostly you. I want you to have something to sell. And I think when we overly focus on free, sometimes the quality can slip a little bit in the patterns. But I have learned that I'm really focused on helping you sell fabric, right? So if those pattern interactions, if you give them free or sell them, that's completely up to you.
What is the name of that pattern?
It's called Good Gracious.
Is that the pattern?
That's right, yes. It is the collection and the pattern. I stopped giving my collection quilt separate names because it just got confusing, so that one's pretty hopefully simple to remember. We have a couple others over here, and then I'm going to show you the backing. These are in the sales cards, and I don't have my readers with me, so I won't be able to tell you what they are, but these are other patterns that the folks at Free Spirit had Good Gracious made into. And I don't know if I know that there are links in the sales cards to all these patterns. So when you're at the table, if you're interested, this would be a fantastic one to kit because it's really a very basic patchwork, but it has a really cool final graphic effect. And I think it works with the colors really beautifully. And it is called something, and it's sewn by someone. And everyone at Free Spirit will have all that information in the sales card so that you guys can get to the appropriate place to pull it together. Thank you. Lenora Quilts? Okay, thank you. And then this is a really, really different take, more contemporary or modern, whatever word you like to use. Using kind of the deeper tones with just that pop of yellow. It sort of has like a very graphic knitwear look to it. It's almost like the Fair Isle, right? Yeah. Pretty cool, pretty cool. And then I want to check too, so the backing, I was pretty sure that I had thrown a piece of backing because we don't get samples of those well in advance of the rest of the things. We have it on paper in the card, right? The backing fabric. Okay, I'm gonna pull it out to show you because it's really fun. I can't wait for this one. I don't know which sales folder it's in. There it is. It might be in both. Okay, so here's the collection. You can kind of see it all together. That's fun too, to get a whole capture of the color. Love seeing that. Now look at this. That's the backing. So the backing is a large scale version of the, what's that? I can't hear. 2 minutes. Oh, 2 minutes. Wrap it up. The backing is a large-scale version of the town meeting, basically, in really rich jewel tones, and the actual real deal is so pretty. I thought it was so cool to quilt your quilt from the back, following those lines, even by hand or by machine. So it's a really, really fun one. I'm pretty excited about that. But yeah, all the information on the other patterns, I never know how to fold these, is here, so be sure and look through that. When you are sitting with your reps and placing massive orders for this collection. And now we have some giveaways.
Wait,
yeah, do you have more information?
Yeah, so now's the time to buy. Now's the time to buy while you're here. Because we have a special for Quilt Market only. Only all you people who travel here to visit the shop, right? Right. So if you buy the complete collection of Good Gracious on 15-yard bolts, you save 5% and you get free freight. You could buy...
Someone holler. Yeah, okay.
Hey,
Doesn't that feel great?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that.
No problem.
Or you could buy the complete collection of Good Gracious on 10-yard bolts and save 5% and take advantage of our capped freight, which in the US is 10 cents a yard. So do the math really quickly. That's really good shipping. Or in Canada, if you're from Canada, it's 15 cents a yard. So that's the Quilt Market special. You could also buy Bloomology.
Yeah, good.
And
Sorry,
get that same savings. So just trying to incentivize you. I mean, Good Gracious, was that quilt not just beautiful? It speaks so much to the name of this collection. You just have to say it. Good Gracious.
You do. That ships in May. Good Gracious ships in May. So one other thing to consider when you're deciding 15-yard bolts and 10-yard bolts, A, 15-yard bolts, B, also consider what you want to kit, because on those cards it shows what you're going to need of each fabric to do that quilt. And this one is entirely patchwork. I have a hard time doing that because I love applique so much, but I thought let's do patchwork. That's just basically all shoe fly blocks on the outside, and I think it's the Old Fellow's chain on the inside, and borders. So consider like your yardage needs for that too, like because if you get a 10-yard collection and then you've only been able to kit 3 based on like the border print or 4, and then you don't, so just keep that in your consideration. So I'm going to draw names for giveaways.